Okay, wait, I'm ready now, I'm ready now. Okay, so I was gonna get, like, background music for the stream. But I totally forgot to do that. And then only remembered it as, like, I was starting up the stream. So, hello everyone. Feel free to, like, fall asleep to this stream, because I'm just gonna read, like, out loud. That's the stream. Today is the 10th of December, 2021, and we are looking at a mostly clear day, 5 degrees high and -2 degrees low, with very, very low chance of rain in New York, because we are reading The Great Gatsby. So, let me bring it up. Let me full screen the game. Full screen the source material. Now, for context, I'm doing this because The Great Gatsby basically recently entered the public domain. The public domain. Hey Tashi. No worries. Enjoy your work. Thanks for coming along. The Great Gatsby recently entered the public domain, so I decided, hey, why not? I've never read The Great Gatsby. Let's go for it. So it turns out that somebody uploaded this version to a website, and so I'll just read it off here. Let me bring up... Hey. So some of you may recognize this website. I promise this is mostly unaltered. I know of one alteration. Possibly. Okay, no, but this is definitely The Great Gatsby. No, I promise, this is actually The Great Gatsby. I promise. Anyway, let me bring up the music. I might have to double check that this is correct audio. I'm in a bad mood, so this better be good. I'm sorry, Johnny, you're about to be very disappointed. There we go. Now we got classical music to go. Classical guitar music. A guitar rendition of classical music that I found like 3 seconds before this stream began. You lost your first place. I'm sorry, Johnny. Okay. There we go. How's that audio? Hang on. What should I turn up the gentle guitar background music? Anyway, this is a website. The summary of the story is... Okay, the title is The Great Gatsby, I think. It is literally just The Great Gatsby, nothing else here. Absolutely no changes. Definitely use this for class, or if... I'm just gonna move myself over here just to make sure. There we go. We're gonna be like in the corner. Definitely use this for class or reference. The Great Gatsby is public domain now, after all. Anyways. Here is the totally unaltered and complete book of The Great Gatsby. I swear nothing was changed. Most definitely. Of course, credit to F. Scott Fitzgerald for writing this commentary on both his life and the world he was in. A lot of this can still relate today, so please keep an open mind when reading. Put on reading glasses and a tux. I only have sunglasses. Can I put on sunglasses? Is that okay? You can pretend this is reading glasses, right? We'll make it... Hang on, can I make it more transparent? I don't think I can. Okay, we'll do it like this. We'll put them down slightly, so I read over the top of them. How about that? I don't have a tux. I'm sorry, I never got around to it. I did the drawing, and I never actually, like, made one that I could wear. I'd like to preface this by saying this is really, I mean really, just The Great Gatsby. I swear. There is nothing going on here that is out of the ordinary, nothing at all. I did not expect this to get any traction, please. I'm sorry if you had to go to counseling after this. Look, okay, I have looked ahead at this. As far as I know, this is actually just The Great Gatsby. With one alteration. Anyway, let's go. This is an audiobook now. Chapter 1. The Great Gatsby, I think. Chapter 1. Then wear the gold hat, if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce for her too. Till she cry, lover, gold-hatted, high-bouncing lover, I must have you. Thomas Park d'Envilliers. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. He didn't say any more, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way, and I understood that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me, and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person, and so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician, because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men. Most of the confidences. I think the music is slightly quiet. I'm going to turn it up slightly. This is going to be a glorious stream. Oh, this is going to be a terrible stream. This is by far going to be the worst stream I've ever made. There we go. It's a bit... no, this is not actually fanfic. This is actually the book. It's just on AO3. There's also one alteration, but that's later. Where was I up to? Ah yes, most of the confidences were unsought. Frequently I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. For the intimate revelations of young men, or at least the terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic and marred by obvious suppressions. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that, as my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeat, a sense of the fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. And, after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes, but after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability, which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right in the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. Do voices, Pip. I'd have to think of, like, voices. What is the... I haven't seen the movie. I'd have to think of, like, what voices is appropriate. I've just been putting on, like, a slightly more upper-class accent for, I assume, Nick as the narrator. Feel free to dress the Earth up in a classy suit. I don't have a suit. My family have been prominent, well-to-do people in this Middle Western city for 3 generations. The Carraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of... I can't pronounce that word. Buccleuch? But the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in 51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started the wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. They're New Yorkers. Give Gatsby a Chinese old woman voice. No, we gotta have fitting voices, and Gatsby probably does not sound like that. I never saw this great uncle, but I'm supposed to look like him. With special reference to the rather hard-boiled painting that hangs in Father's office, I graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after my father, and a little later I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. I enjoyed the counter-raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being the warm center of the world, the Middle West now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe, so I decided to go east and learn the bond business. Everybody I knew was in the bond business, so I supposed it could support one more single man. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me, and finally said, "Why, yes." with very grave, hesitant faces. Father agreed to finance me for a year, and after various delays, I came east, permanently I thought, in the spring of 22. Hello, mates, me... Hello, mates, me Gatsby. Add your own imagining of how things happen, make Nick curse like a sailor. I don't even curse like a sailor on my own streams. Why am I meant to make Nick swear? The practical thing was to find rooms in the city, but it was a warm season and I had just left a country of wide lawns and friendly trees. So when a young man at the office suggested that we take a house together in a commuting town, it sounded like a great idea. He found a house, a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow at $80 a month, but at the last minute the firm ordered him to Washington, and I went out to the country alone. I had a dog. At least I had him for a few days until he ran away, and an old Dodge and a Finnish woman who made my bed and cooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. Probably things like perkele. It was lonely for a day or so until one morning some man, more recently arrived than I, stopped me on the road. "How do you go to West Egg Village?" he asked helplessly. I told him, and as I walked on I was lonely no longer. I was a guide, a pathfinder, an original settler. He had casually conferred on me the freedom of the neighborhood. "They're New Yorkers, give them a Brooklyn accent, like Joey Wheeler from Yu-Gi-Oh! 1. I don't want to do that. Maybe I'll do that for Gatsby. I'm just gonna move myself over slightly, by the way. That's the wrong thing. That's still the wrong thing. There we go. Should I make the guitar music louder? I feel like I should make the guitar music louder. We're gonna keep making it louder eventually until it's just louder than I am. And so, with the sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer. There was so much to read for one thing, and so much fine health to be pulled down out of the young breath-giving air. I bought a dozen volumes on banking and credit and investment securities, and they stood on my shelf in red and gold like new money from the mint, promising to unfold the shining secrets that only Midas and Morgan and Maecenas knew. I probably pronounced that wrong. If anything, make the music more quiet. Sorry, did you say make the music louder again? Where was I? Ah, yes. And I had the high intention of reading many other books besides. I was rather literary in college. One year I wrote a series of very solemn and obvious editorials for the Yale News. And now I was going to bring back all such things into my life and become again that most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded man. This isn't an epigram. Life is just more successfully looked at from a single window, after all. Okay, no, I will make the music more quiet. It's probably loud. Okay. It's at like 15. No, 16. Okay. I can't believe there's 8 of you here. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on that slender, riotous island which extends itself due east of New York, and where there are, among other natural curiosities, 2 unusual formations of land. 20 miles from the city, a pair of enormous eggs, identical in contour and separated only by a courtesy bay, jut out into the most domesticated body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere. The great wet barnyard of Long Island South. They are not perfect ovals, like the egg in the Columbus story. They are both crushed flat at the contact end. But their physical resemblance must be a source of perpetual confusion to the gulls that fly overhead. To the wingless, a more arresting phenomenon is their dissimilarity in every particular except shape and size. We have comfortable. You might as well just play screaming and farting just so you barely hear it over the music. I lived at West Egg, the less fashionable of the two, though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between 2 huge places that rented for $12,000 or $15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy, and a marble swimming pool and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion. Or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, It was a mansion inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore, and it had been overlooked. So I had a view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. I like West Egg, sounds like an egg place. Well, apparently it's egg-shaped. So, there you go. But it's the worst egg. Presumably the East Egg is better. Across the Courtesy Bay, the White Palaces of fashionable East Egg, here we go, glittered along the water. And the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. I definitely did not pronounce that correctly. Tom Buchanans? Buchanans. Butt faces. Daisy was my second cousin once removed, and I'd known Tom in college. And just after the war, I spent 2 years with them in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven. A national figure in a way, one of those men who reach such an acute limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savours of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Buchanan. US dollars 80 in 1920 is $1,000 now? Oh my god. Why they came east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. And so it happened that on a warm, windy evening I drove over to West Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. Their house was even more elaborate than I expected, a cheerful red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach, and ran toward the front door for a quarter of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walls and burning gardens. Finally, when it reached the house, drifting up the side in bright vines as though from the momentum of its run, the front was broken by a line of French windows, glowing now with reflected gold, and wide open to the warm, windy afternoon. And Tom Buchanan, in riding clothes, was standing with his legs apart on the front porch. Pretty good for a month. It's good, but it's also, damn, pricey. Well, I guess it is a nice neighborhood. Could be much worse, considering how much Gatsby probably paid for his. Buchanan? You know what, you can keep correcting me. Has this really been going on for 20 minutes already? To be fair, like 10 minutes of that was me trying to find the right music. He had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30 with a rather hard mouth and a supercilious manner. Two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to fill those glistening boots until he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under his thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage. A cruel body. Is it? Okay, it's Buchanan. Got it. Okay. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of facetiousness. Wait, no, fractiousness that he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it, even toward people he liked, and there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts. I gotta put on a voice to it. I gotta put on a gruff husky tenor. How am I meant to do that? I can't do that. A gruff husky tenor. Grr, gruff. That's bad. Now, I don't think my opinion on these matters is final, he seemed to say, just because I'm stronger and more of a man than you are. We were in the same senior society, and while we were never intimate, I always had the impression he approved of me and wanted me to like him with some harsh, defiant wistfulness of his own. We talked for a few minutes on the sunny porch. "I've got a nice place here," he said, his eyes flashing about restlessly. Turning me around by one arm, he moved a broad flat hand along the front vista, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden, a half acre. Wow, did I say that wrong twice? A half acre of deep, pungent roses and a snub-nosed motorboat that bumped the tide offshore. "It belonged to Demain, the oil man." He turned me around again, politely and abruptly. "We'll go inside." We walked through a high hallway into a bright, rosy-coloured space, fragilely bound into the house by French windows at either end. The windows were ajar and gleaming white against the fresh glass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. A breeze blew through the room, blue curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up toward the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-coloured rug, making a shadow on it as wind does on the sea. The only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which two young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. They were both in white, and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments, listening to the whip and snap of the curtains, and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows, and the court wind died about the room, and the curtains and the rugs and the two young women ballooned slowly to the floor. The younger of the two was a stranger to me. She was extended full length at her end of the divan, completely motionless and with her chin raised a little as if she were balancing something on it, which was quite likely to fall. If she saw me out of the corner of her eyes, she gave no hint of it. Indeed, I was almost surprised into murmuring an apology for having disturbed her by coming in. The other girl, Daisy, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscientious expression. Then she laughed, an absurd, charming little laugh, and I laughed too and came forward into the room. "I'm paralyzed with happiness." She laughed again, as if she said something very witty, and held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see. That was a way she had. She hinted in a murmur that the surname of the balancing girl was Baker. I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean toward her, an irrelevant criticism that made it no less charming. At any rate, Miss Baker's lips fluttered. She nodded at me almost imperceptibly, and then quickly tipped her head back again. Wow, I'm just flubbing everything now. The object she was balancing had obviously tottered a little and given her something of a fright. Again, a sort of apology arose to my lips. Almost any exhibition of complete self-sufficiency draws a stunned tribute from me. I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in a low, thrilling voice. It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face was sad and lovely, with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who had cared for her found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion, a whispered "listen," a promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, and that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. I told her how I had stopped off in Chicago for a day on my way east, and how a dozen people had sent their love through me. "Do they miss me?" she cried ecstatically. "The whole town is desolate. All the cars have left the rear wheel painted black. The left rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night along the North Shore. How gorgeous! Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow." Then she added irrelevantly, "You ought to see the baby." "I'd like to." "She's asleep. She's 2 years old. Haven't you ever seen her?" "Never." "Well, you ought to see her. She's—" Tom Buchanan, who had been hovering restlessly about the room, stopped and rested his hand on my shoulder. "What are you doing, Nick?" "I'm a bondman." "Who with?" I told him. "Never heard of them," he remarked decisively. This annoyed me. "You will," I answered shortly. "You will if you stay in the East." "Oh, I'll stay in the East, don't you worry," he said, glancing at Daisy and then back at me, as if he were alert for something more. "I'd be a goddamn fool to live anywhere else." At this point, Miss Baker said, "Absolutely," with such suddenness that I started. It was the first word she uttered since I came into the room. Evidently, it surprised her as much as it did me, for she yawned, and with a series of rapid, deft movements stood up into the room. "I'm stiff," she complained. "I've been lying on that sofa for as long as I can remember." "Don't look at me," Daisy retorted. "I've been trying to get you to New York all afternoon." "No thanks," said Miss Baker, to the four cocktails just in front of the pantry. Just in from the pantry. "I'm absolutely in training." Her host looked at her incredulously. "You are?" He took down his drink as if it were a drop in the bottom of a glass. "How you ever get anything done is beyond me." I looked at Miss Baker, wondering what it was she got done. I enjoyed looking at her. She was a slender, small-breasted girl with an erect carriage which she accentuated by throwing her body backwards at the shoulders like a young cadet. Her grey, sun-strained eyes looked back at me with polite reciprocal curiosity out of a wan, charming, discontented face. It occurred to me now that I had seen her, or a picture of her, somewhere before. "You live in West Egg," she remarked contemptuously. I know somebody there." "I don't know a single—" "You must know Gatsby." "Gatsby?" demanded Daisy. "What Gatsby?" Oh, Gatsby, why do you remember that? No, it's Nick mentioning this, not Gatsby. Gatsby is the character, but Nick is the narrator, I believe. Before I could reply that he was my neighbor, dinner was announced. Wedging his tense arm imperatively under mine, Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square. Slenderly, languidly, their hands set lightly on their hips, the two young women preceded us out onto a rosy-colored porch open towards the sunset, where 4 candles flickered on the table in the diminished wind. Buchanan. Oh, right. Buchanan. Why is it spelt like this? What kind of a name? Where's it from? "Why candles?" objected Daisy, frowning. She snapped them out with her fingers. "In 2 weeks it'll be the longest day in the year." She looked at us all radiantly. "Do you always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it?" "I always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it." What a statement that was, sorry. "We ought to plan something," yawned Miss Baker, sitting down at the table as if she were getting into bed. "All right," said Daisy. "What'll we plan?" She turned to me helplessly. "What do people plan?" Buchanan. Okay, Buchanan. Before I could answer, her eyes fastened with an awed expression on her little finger. "Look," she complained. "I hurt it." We all looked. The knuckle was black and blue. "You did it, Tom," she said accusingly. "I know you didn't mean to, but you did do it. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man. A great big hulking physical specimen of a—" "I hate that word, hulking," objected Tom crossly. "Even in kidding." "Hulking," insisted Daisy. Sometimes she and Miss Baker talked at once, unobtrusively and with a bantering inconsequence that was never quite chatter. That was as cool as their white dresses and their impersonal eyes in the absence of all desire. They were here, and they accepted Tom and me, making only a polite, pleasant effort to entertain or to be entertained. They knew that presently dinner would be over, and a little later the evening too would be over and casually put away. It was sharply different from the West, where an evening was hurried from phase to phase towards its close in a continually disappointed anticipation, or else in sheer nervous dread of the moment itself. "You make me feel uncivilized, Daisy," I confessed on my second glass of corky but rather impressive claret. "Can't you talk about crops or something?" I meant nothing in particular by this remark, but it was taken up in an unexpected way. "Civilization's going to pieces," broke out Tom violently. "I've gotten to be a terrible pessimist about things. Haven't you read The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man Goddard?" "Why no," I answered, rather surprised by his tone. "Well, it's a fine book, and everybody ought to read it. The idea is if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific stuff, it's been proved." Oh no. Oh no, perhaps I shouldn't be reading this book. Anyway, Tom's getting very... big words. "Tom's getting very profound," said Daisy with an expression of unthoughtful sadness. "He reads deep books with long words in them. What was that word we—" "Well, these books are all scientific," insisted Tom, glancing at her impatiently. "This fellow has worked out the whole thing. It's up to us who are the dominant race to watch out, or these other races will have control of things." "We've got to beat them down," whispered Daisy, winking ferociously towards the fervent sun. "You ought to live in California," began Miss Baker, but Tom interrupted her by shifting heavily in his chair. "Hey, Nexo! You've covered it. What a wonderful discussion topic's covered it. This idea is that we're Nordics. I am, and you are, and after an infinitesimal hesitation, he included... Oh, I was meant to put on Tom's voice there. He included Daisy with a slight nod, and she winked at me again. "And we've all produced the things that go to make civilization, science and art and all that. Do you see?" There was something pathetic in his concentration, as if his complacency, more acute than of old, was not enough to him anymore, when, almost immediately, the telephone rang inside, and the butler left the porch. Daisy seized upon the momentary interruption and leaned towards me. Some of these sentences are really weirdly paced, and I keep reading them wrong. "I'll tell you a family secret," she whispered enthusiastically. "It's about the butler's nose. Do you want to hear about the butler's nose? That's why I came over tonight. Well, he wasn't always a butler. He used to be this silver polisher for some people in New York that had a silver service for 200 people. He had to polish it from morning till night until finally it began to affect his nose. Things went from bad to worse," suggested Miss Baker. "Yes, things went from bad to worse until finally he had to give up his position." For a moment, the last sunshine fell with romantic affection upon her glowing face. Her voice compelled me forward breathlessly as I listened. Then the glow faded, each light deserting her with lingering regret like children leaving a pleasant street at dusk. The butler came back and murmured something close to Tom's ear, whereupon Tom frowned, pushed back his chair, and without a word went inside. As if his absence quickened something within her, Daisy leant forward once again. That's not the line. As if his absence quickened something within her, Daisy leaned forward again, her voice glowing and singing. "I love to see you at my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose. An absolute rose, doesn't he?" She returned to Miss Baker for confirmation. "An absolute rose?" This was untrue. I'm not even faintly like a rose. She was only extemporizing, but a stirring warmth flowed from her, as if her heart was trying to come out to you concealed in one of those breathless, trilling words. Then suddenly, she threw her napkin on the table, and excused herself, and went into the house. Miss Baker and I exchanged a short glance consciously devoid of meaning. I was about to speak when she sat up alertly and said, "Shh," in a warning voice. A subdued, impassioned murmur was audible in the room beyond, and Miss Baker leaned forward, unashamed, trying to hear. The murmur trembled on the verge of coherence, sank down, mounted excitedly, and then ceased altogether. What's this novel about? I have no idea. Something about the American dream or something in Mr. Gatsby. I genuinely do not know. At the moment, it's just upper-class people gossiping with each other, and it has been for like a good couple thousand words at this point. I'm gonna drink some water. "This Mr. Gatsby you spoke of is my neighbor," I said. "Don't talk, I want to hear what happens." "Is something happening?" I inquired innocently. "You mean to say you don't know?" said Miss Baker, honestly surprised. "I thought everybody knew." "I don't." "Why," she said hesitantly, "Tom's got some woman in New York." "Got some woman?" I repeated blankly. Miss Baker nodded. "She might have the decency not to telephone him at dinner time, don't you think?" Almost before I had grasped her meaning, there was the flutter of a dress and the crunch of leather boots, and Tom and Daisy were back at the table. "It couldn't be helped!" cried Daisy with tense gaiety. She sat down, glanced searchingly at Miss Baker and then at me, and continued. "I looked outdoors for a minute, and it's very romantic outdoors. There's a bird on the lawn that I think must be a nightingale come over on the Cunard or White Star line. He's singing away." Her voice sang. "It's romantic, isn't it, Tom?" Yeah, the turtle's providing the faint guitar music in the background. "Very romantic," he said, and then miserably to me, "If it's light enough after dinner, I want to take you down to the stables." The telephone rang inside, startlingly, and as Daisy shook her head decisively at Tom, the subject of the stables, in fact all subjects, vanished into air. Among the broken fragments of the last 5 minutes at table, I remember the candles being lit again, pointlessly, and I was conscious of wanting to look squarely at everyone and yet to avoid all eyes. I couldn't guess what Daisy and Tom were thinking, but I doubt if even Miss Baker, who seemed to have mastered a certain hardy skepticism, was able utterly to put this fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency out of mind. To a certain temperament, the situation might have seemed intriguing. My own instinct was to telephone immediately for the police. The horses, needless to say, were not mentioned again. Tom and Miss Baker, with several feet of twilight between them, strolled back into the library, as if to a vigil beside a perfectly tangible body. While trying to look pleasantly interested and a little deaf, I followed Daisy around a chain of connecting verandas to the porch in front. In its deep gloom, we sat down side by side on a wicker settee. Daisy took her face in her hands as if feeling its lovely shape, and her eyes moved gradually out into the velvet dusk. I saw that turbulent emotions possessed her, so I asked what I thought would be some sedative questions about her little girl. If the Turtles is the one who does the background music, then I'm glad you didn't put... Yeah, I'm glad I didn't put screaming and farting on either. We don't know each other very well, Nick, she said suddenly, even if we are cousins. You didn't come to my wedding. I wasn't back from the war. That's true. She hesitated. Well, I've had a very bad time, Nick, and I'm pretty cynical about everything. Evidently, she had reason to be. I waited, but she didn't say any more, and after a moment I returned rather feebly to the subject of her daughter. I suppose she talks and eats and everything. Oh yes, she looked at me absently. Listen, Nick, let me tell you what I said when she was born. Would you like to hear? Very much. It'll show you how I've gotten to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling and asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said. I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. A girl can be in this world. A beautiful little fool. This book is... There's some interesting viewpoints in this book. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow, she went on in a convinced way. Everybody thinks so, the most advanced people. And I know. I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. Her eyes flashed around her in a defiant way, rather like Tom's, and she laughed with thrilling scorn. Sophisticated! God, I'm sophisticated. The Great Gatsby is a sequel to Titanic. After surviving the sinking of Titanic and attacked by a bear, Leonardo DiCaprio started a new life. Yeah, he started a new life as the Great Gatsby. He changed his name and became a Sophisticate. And then I think he dies at the end of this book. Spoilers. The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in a moment, she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society to which she and Tom belong. Also, hey Mia, thanks for dropping by. Inside, the Crimson Room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat at either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post. The words, murmurous and uninflected, running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight, bright on his boots and dull on the autumn leaf yellow of her hair, glinted along the paper as she turned a page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arms. When we came in, she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. To be continued, she said, tossing the magazine on the table, in our very next issue. Her body asserted itself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. 10 o'clock, she remarked, apparently finding the time on the ceiling. Time for this good girl to go to bed. Jordan's going to play in the tournament tomorrow, explained Daisy, over at Westchester. Westchester? Sorry. Oh, you're Jordan Baker. I knew now why her face was familiar. Its pleasing, contemptuous expression had looked out to me from many rotogravure pictures of the sporting life at Asheville and Hot Springs and Palm Beach. I had heard some of her story too, a critical, unpleasant story, but what it was I had forgotten long ago. Good night, she said softly. Wake me up at 8, won't you? If you'll get up. I will. Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you anon. Of course you will, confirmed Daisy. In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of, fling you together. You know, lock you up accidentally in linen closets and push you out to sea in a boat and all that sort of thing. "Good night," called Miss Baker from the stairs. "I haven't heard a word." "She's a nice girl," said Tom after a moment. They oughtn't to let her run around the country this way." "Who oughtn't to?" inquired Daisy coldly. "Her family." "Her family is one aunt about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's going to look after her. Aren't you, Nick? She's going to spend lots of weekends out here this summer. I think the home influence will be very good for her." Daisy and Tom looked at each other for a moment in silence. "Is she from New York?" I asked quickly. "From Louisville." "Louisville?" "Louisville. Our white girlhood was passed together there. Our beautiful white—" "Did you give Nick a little heart-to-heart talk on the veranda?" demanded Tom suddenly. "Did I?" She looked at me. "I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yes, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us, and the first thing you know—" "Don't believe everything you hear, Nick," he advised me. Credit Nick. Grat's quoting YouTube, the friggin' Morshu YouTube poops again. I said lightly that I had heard nothing at all, and a few minutes later I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful square of light. As I started my motor, Daisy peremptorily called, "Wait! I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out west." "That's right," corroborated Tom kindly. "We heard that you were engaged." It's Libel. I'm too poor. "But we heard it," insisted Daisy, surprising me by opening up again in a flower-like way. "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." Of course I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even vaguely engaged. The fact that gossip had published the bans was one of the reasons I had come east. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of rumors, and on the other hand, I had no intention of being rumored into marriage. Libel. I'm bad at pronouncing words. Their interest rather touched me and made them less remotely rich. Nevertheless, I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was to rush out of the house, child in arms, but apparently there were no such intentions in her head. As for Tom, the fact that he had some woman in New York was really less surprising than that he had been depressed by a book. Something was making him nibble at the edge of stale ideas as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart. Libel. Oh, okay. It's pronounced libel. I'm sorry I can't read pronunciations and can't pronounce words. Already it was deep summer on roadhouse roofs and in front of wayside garages, where new red gas pumps sat out in pools of light. And when I reached my estate in West Egg, I ran... Why is it called West Egg? I ran the car under its shed and sat for a while on an abandoned grass roller in the yard. The wind had blown off, leaving a loud, bright night with wings beating in the trees and a persistent organ sound as the full bellows of the earth blew the frogs full of life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw that I was not alone. 50 feet away, a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion, and was standing with his hands in his pockets regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements and the secure position of his feet upon the lawn suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself, come out to determine what share was his of our local heavens. I decided to call to him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction. But I didn't call to him, for he gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms towards the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward, and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished. I was alone again in the unquiet darkness. Chapter 2. Pip can only kinda read. Dude, is the insanity setting in a bit before I thought it would happen? Oh yeah, I'm very insane. That was all of Chapter 1 of The Great Gatsby. There are 7, I think, chapters of this book. 9 chapters. That was Chapter 1. how many minutes? 47 minutes in, we have completed the first chapter. Somebody do the math on that. How many minutes? I have lost my spot. Hang on, how many, assuming that all of that time was actually spent reading. That's 47 times 9. That's 423 minutes of reading, or 7 straight hours if I wanted to read the entirety of The Great Gatsby on stream. And chapter 2, it's just chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. Are you all losing your minds yet? I'm losing my minds a little bit. I'm losing it a little bit. At least the guitar is nice. Let's turn that up just real quick. Let's just crank that. Everyone just sit and relax and enjoy the guitar. Oh no. Pip, I'm not gonna stay if you read the whole thing. I'm not gonna stay if I read the whole thing. Now see, I told you, this really was... Hang on, I turned the music up too high. No, I told you, this really is just the entirety of The Great Gatsby. Crank that soldier boy. What? I can't believe you're still here, you people. You guys. Thank you for being here, but my goodness. No, just speaking. You just want me to blast the guitar music at full volume? Can I offer a volume warning for this? I'm about to. 3, 2, 1, volume warning. Yeah, hang on, it's locked. Okay. 3, 2, 1, volume warning. I can make it louder. We're making it louder. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, it's back to normal now. More. We're not making... He just fully alarm clocked anyone who was sleeping. Sorry! Ow. Amazing. You truly are the Great Gatsby, Tom. I feel like we should just leave it there for tonight. This will be my shortest stream I've ever done. Just like an hour. Ear up, Trey ASMR. Sorry, I think I woke everyone up. But there we go, that was chapter 1 of The Great Gatsby. Look at that. We're 1/9 of the way through. Bruh, no. What, you want me to keep going? You want me to keep going for like another chapter? How long is this chapter? Look how long this chapter is. All this. Surely one more chapter, we have to go back to sleep. Another hour of this? 6 more streams. No, this was like 50% a joke and like 50% to see how much I could get away with. Ah, I'm here for book. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I just need a moment. Oh. Okay. More reading? Next chapter. I'm hearing 2 votes for next chapter. Any objections? Just lull us to sleep, please. Alright, that sounds like 3 votes for next chapter. Sure, why not? I'm here all day. Oh god, don't tell me that. Okay. Chapter 2. Just chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. The end of the chapter for notes. I'm kind of curious to view the notes, but I don't want any spoilers. Let's open it in a new tab. Let's see it. No, it didn't work. Okay. If I click there. Oh! Okay, I'm not sure what just happened. Oh, hang on. Entire work. Lull us to sleep with your dulcet tones and incorrect pronunciation. Don't be mean to my pronunciation! Alright, hang on. chapter, because it's easier than... Okay. Okay, we're back at West Egg. Chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. Strap in, boys and girls, it'll be a wild next 40 minutes. About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges, and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with a transcendent effort, of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Yeah, well, look, West Egg implies the existence of East, North, and South Egg. There is only a West and an East Egg. Where was I? Occasionally, a line of grey cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak, and comes to rest, and immediately the ash-grey men swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud, which screens their obscure operations from your sight. But above the grey land and the spasms of bleak dust which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles, which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently, some wild wag of an oculist set them there to fatten his practice in the borough of Queens, and then sat him down himself into an eternal blindness, or forgot them and moved away. But his eyes, dimmed a little by many paintless days under sun and rain, brood on over the solemn dumping ground. The Valley of Ashes is bounded on one side by a small foul river, and when the drawbridge is up to let barges through, the passengers on waiting trains can stare at the dismal scene for as long as half an hour. There is always a halt there of at least a minute, and it was because of this that I first met Tom... I'm already gonna mispronounce his name again. Tom Buchanan's mistress. They're separated by the egg wall after the East Egg. No, it's not the Berlin Wall. East Egg and West Egg are not Berlin. Tom Buchanan. Okay, Tom Buchanan. The fact that he had one was insisted upon wherever he was known. His acquaintances resented the fact that he turned up in popular restaurants with her, and leaving her at a table, sauntered about, chatting with whomsoever he knew. Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her, but I did. I went up to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet, and taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. "We're getting off," he insisted. "I want you to meet my girl." To think he'd tanked up a good deal at luncheon, and his determination to have my company bordered on violence. Sorry, I think he'd tanked up a good deal at luncheon, and his determination to have my company bordered on violence. The supercilious assumption was that on Sunday afternoon, I had nothing better to do. I followed him over a low whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road under Dr. Eckelberg's persistent stare. The only building in sight was a small block of yellow brick, sitting on the edge of the wasteland, a sort of compact main street, ministering to it and contingents to absolutely nothing. One of the 3 shops it contained was for rent, and another was an all-night restaurant approached by a trail of ashes. The third was a garage. Repairs. George B. Wilson. Cars bought and sold. And I followed Tom inside. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was the dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in a dim corner. It had occurred to me that this shadow of a garage must be a blind. Sorry. I just had to reread that to make sure I read that correctly. It had occurred to me that this shadow of a garage must be a blind, and that sumptuous and romantic apartments were concealed overhead when the proprietor himself appeared in the corner of an office, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He was a blond, spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. "Hello, Wilson, old man," said Tom, slapping him jovially on the shoulder. "How's business?" "I can't complain," answered Wilson unconvincingly. "When are you going to sell me that car?" "Next week. I've got my man working on it now." Works pretty slow, don't he? No, he doesn't, said Tom coldly. And if you feel that way about it, maybe I'd better sell it somewhere else after all. I don't mean it like that, explained Wilson quickly. I just meant... His voice faded off, and Tom glanced impatiently around the garage. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, and in a moment, the thickish figure of a woman blocked out the light from the office door. She was in the middle 30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh sensuously. Sorry, that was a lot of S's real quick. She carried her surplus flesh sensuously, as some women can. Her face, above a spotted dress of dark blue crepe de chine, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediately perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smouldering. She smiled slowly, and walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, shook hands with Tom, looking him flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips, and without turning around, spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. What a mean description, Nick. That was really rude. Nick just straight up went, oh yeah, this woman's kind of like, she's kind of fat. And her face is really ugly. But she looks like she's got vitality, I guess. Damn. How do I do a soft, coarse voice? I'll just keep doing the same voice I've been doing for all the women. Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down? Oh sure, agreed Wilson hurriedly, and he went toward the little office, mingling immediately with the cement color of the walls. A white ashen dust veiled his dark suit, and his pale hair as it veiled everything in the vicinity, except his wife, who moved closer to Tom. It's just saying, damn she thick. Damn she thick. But in great... Okay, next time somebody says, damn she thick, I want you to correct them to, she carried her surplus flesh sensuously as some women can. The next time you want to say that instead. Use Gatsby language. Except his wife, who moved closer to Tom. I want to see you, said Tom intently. Get on the next train. All right. I'll meet you by the newsstand on the lower level. She nodded and moved away from him just as George Wilson emerged with 2 chairs from his office door. Just putting that into a text real quick. Have fun, Grat. I hope your flirting goes well. We waited for her down the road and out of sight. It was a few days before the 4th of July, and a grey, scrawny Italian child was setting torpedoes in a row along the railroad track. Terrible place, isn't it? Said Tom, exchanging a frown with Dr. Eckelberg. Awful. It does her good to get away. Doesn't her husband object? Wilson? He thinks she goes to see her sister in New York. He's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive. So Tom Buchanan and his girl and I went up together to New York. Or, not quite together, for Mrs. Wilson sat discreetly in another car. Tom deferred that much to the sensibilities of those East Eggers who might be on the train. She had changed her dress to a brown-figured muslin, which stretched tight over her rather wide hips, as Tom helped her to the platform in New York. At the newsstand, she brought a copy of Town Tattle and a moving picture magazine, and, in the station drugstore, some cold cream and a small flask of perfume. Upstairs, in the solemn echoing drive, she let 4 taxicabs drive away before she selected a new one, lavender-colored with grey upholstery. And in this we slid out from the mass of the station into the glowing sunshine. But immediately, she turned sharply from the window, and leaning forward tapped on the front glass. I want to get one of those dogs, she said earnestly. I want to get one for the apartment. They're nice to have, a dog. We backed up to a grey old man who bore an absurd resemblance to John D. Rockefeller. In a basket, swung from his neck, cowered a dozen very recent puppies of an indeterminate breed. What kind are they? Asked Mrs. Wilson eagerly as he came to the taxi window. All kinds. What do you want, lady? I'd like to get one of those police dogs. I don't suppose you've got that kind. The man peered doubtfully into the basket, plunging in his hand and drew one up, wriggling by the back of the neck. That's no police dog, said Tom. No, it's not exactly a police dog, said the man with disappointment in his voice. It's more of an Airedale. Airedale? Airedale. He passed his hand over the brown wash rag of a back. Look at that coat. Some coat. That's a dog that'll never bother you with catching a cold. I think it's cute, said Mrs. Wilson enthusiastically. How much is it? That dog? He looked at it admiringly. Admiringly! There we go. That dog will cost you $10. The Airedale, undoubtedly there was an Airedale concerned in it somewhere, though its feet were startlingly white, changed hands and settled down in Mrs. Wilson's lap, where she fondled the weatherproof coat with rapture. Is it a boy or a girl? She asked delicately. That dog? That dog's a boy. It's a bitch, said Tom decisively. Here's your money. Go and buy 10 more dogs with it. We drove over to Fifth Avenue, so warm and soft, almost pastoral on the summer Sunday afternoon that I wouldn't have been surprised to see a great flock of white sheep turn the corner. Hold on, I said. I have to leave you here. Grat's saying that he's a hobbit and can't get women. I'm sorry, Grat. Tom is such a... Yeah, Tom's kind of a jerk. But so far, like, most of the characters seem to be. Also, they just bought a dog, like, just on the street side. Out the window of their taxi. They just bought a dog. That just happened. No papers or anything, just $10. Here you go. How much is $10 in today money? Somebody Google it. Okay. No, you don't, interposed Tom quickly. Myrtle will be hurt if you don't come up to the apartment. Won't you, Myrtle? Come on, she urged. I'll telephone my sister, Catherine. She's said to be very beautiful by people who ought to know. Well, I'd like to, but... We went on, cutting back again over the park towards the West Hundreds. At 158th Street, the cab stopped at one slice of a long white cake of apartment houses. Throwing a regal homecoming glance around the neighborhood, Mrs. Wilson gathered up her dog and her other purchases and went haughtily in. I'm going to have the McKees come up, she announced as we rose in the elevator. And of course I got to call up my sister too. The apartment was on the top floor, a small living room, a small dining room, a small bedroom, and a bath. $10 in 1920 is $130.10 in 2020. Good to know. The living room was crowded to the doors with a set of tapestried... Thank you for looking that up. Tapestried furniture entirely too large for it, so that to move about it was to stumble continually over scenes of ladies swinging in the gardens of Versailles. The only picture was an over-enlarged photograph, apparently a hen sitting on a blurred rock. Looked at from a distance, however, the hen resolved itself into a bonnet, and the countenance of a stout old lady beamed down into the room. Several old copies of Town Tattle lay on the table together with a copy of Simon Called Peter, and some of the small scandal magazines of Broadway. Mrs. Wilson was first concerned with the dog. A reluctant elevator boy went for a box full of straw and some milk, to which he added on his own initiative a tin of large, hard dog biscuits, one of which decomposed apathetically in the saucer of milk all afternoon. Meanwhile, Tom brought out a bottle of whiskey from a locked bureau door. I have been drunk just twice in my life, and the second time was that afternoon, so everything that happened has a dim, hazy cast over it, although until after 8 o'clock, the apartment was full of cheerful sun. Sitting on Tom's lap, Mrs. Wilson called up several people on the telephone. Then, there were no cigarettes, and I went out to buy some at the drugstore on the corner. When I came back, they had disappeared, so I sat down discreetly in the living room and read a chapter of Simon Called Peter. Either it was terrible stuff, or the whiskey distorted things, because it didn't make any sense to me. Just as Tom and Myrtle, after the first drink Mrs. Wilson and I called each other by our first names, reappeared, company commenced to arrive at the apartment door. I want to check just a second how long this is. Oh no, there's so much dialogue. Okay, I've started, so I have to finish, I guess. There is a lot of dialogue. The sister, Catherine, was a slender, worldly girl of about 30, with a solid, sticky bob of red hair, and a complexion powdered milky white. Her eyebrows had been plucked and then drawn on again at a more rakish angle, but the efforts of nature toward the restoration of the older line gave a blurred air to her face. When she moved about, there was an incessant clicking, as innumerable pottery bracelets jingled up and down upon her arms. She came with such a proprietary haste, and looked around so possessively at the furniture that I wondered if she lived there. But when I asked her, she laughed immoderately, repeated my question aloud, and told me she lived with a girlfriend at the hotel. Mr. McKee was a pale, feminine man from the flat below. He had just shaved, for there was a white spot of lather on his cheekbone, and he was most respectful in his greeting to everyone in the room. He informed me that he was in the artistic game, and I gathered later that he was a photographer, and had made the dim enlargement of Mrs. Wilson's mother, which hovered like an ectoplasm on the wall. His wife was shrill, languid, handsome, and horrible. She told me with pride that her husband had photographed her 127 times since they had been married. Mrs. Wilson had changed her costume some time before, and was now attired in an elaborate afternoon dress of cream-coloured chiffon, which gave out a continual rustle as she swept about the room. With the influence of the dress, her personality had also undergone a change. The intense vitality that had been so remarkable in the garage was converted into impressive hauteur. Her laughter, her gestures, her assertions became more violently affected by moment by moment, and as she expanded, the room grew smaller around her until she seemed to be revolving on a noisy, creaking pivot through the smoky air. Welcome back, Grat. Hope you had a good pee. My dear, she told her sister in a high, mincing shout, most of these fellows will cheat you every time. All they think of is money. I had a woman up here last week to look at my feet, and when she gave me the bill, you'd have thought she had my appendicitis out. What was the name of the woman? Asked Mrs. McKee. Mrs. Eberhardt. She goes around looking at people's feet in their own homes. I like your dress, remarked Mrs. McKee. I think it's adorable. Mrs. Wilson rejected the compliment by raising her eyebrow in disdain. It's just a crazy old thing. Was that sass in the P word? It was not sass. It's just a crazy old thing, she said. I just slip it on sometimes when I don't care what I look like. But it looks so wonderful on you, if you know what I mean, pursued Mrs. McKee. If Chester could only get you in that pose, I think he could make something of it. We all looked in silence. Why are we talking about people looking at feet? I don't know, apparently Mrs. Eberhardt just looks at people's feet in their own homes. Yeah, I don't know. We all looked in silence as Mrs. Wilson, who removed a strand of hair from over her eyes and looked back at us with a brilliant smile. Mr. McKee regarded her intently with his head on one side and then moved his hand back and forth slowly in front of his face. I should change the light, he said after a moment. I'd like to bring out the modelling of the features, and I tried to get hold of all the back hair. I wouldn't think of changing the light, cried Mrs. McKee. I think it's... Her husband said, shh! And we all looked at the subject again, whereupon Tom Buchanan yawned audibly and got to his feet. You McKees have something to drink, he said. Get some more ice and minerals, Walter Myrtle, before everyone goes to sleep. I told that boy about the ice. Miss Myrtle raised her eyebrows in despair at the shiftlessness of the lower orders. These people, you have to keep after them all the time. She looked at me and laughed pointlessly. Then she flounced over to the dog, kissed her with ecstasy, and swept into the kitchen, implying that a dozen chefs waited her order there. I've done some nice things out on Long Island. Sorry, that's a guy. You know what, it still fits, asserted Mr. McKee. Tom looked at him blankly. Two of them we have framed downstairs. Two of what? Demanded Tom. 2 studies. One of them I call Montauk Point, the gulls, and the other I call Montauk Point, the sea. The sister Catherine sat beside me on the couch. Do you live down on Long Island too? She inquired. I live at West Egg. Really? I was down there at a party about a month ago at a man named Gatsby's. Do you know him? I live next door to him. Well, they say he's a nephew or a cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm's. That's where all his money comes from. Really? She nodded. I'm scared of him. I'd hate to have him get anything on me. This absorbing information about my neighbor was interrupted by Mrs. McKee's pointing suddenly at Catherine. Chester, I think you could do something with her! She broke out. But Mr. McKee only nodded in a bored way and turned his attention to Tom. I'd like to do more work on Long Island if I could get the entry. All I ask is that they should give me a start. Ask Myrtle, said Tom, breaking into a short shout of laughter as Mrs. Wilson entered with a tray. She'll give you a letter of introduction, won't she, Myrtle? How is this something you have to read in school? I don't know. I feel terrible for any kids who have to read this. Do what? She said, startled. You'll give McKee a letter of introduction to your husband so he can do some studies of him. His lips moved silently for a moment as he invented George B. Wilson at the gasoline pump, or something like that. Catherine leaned close to me and whispered in my ear. Neither of them can stand the person they're married to. Can't they? Can't stand them. She looked at Myrtle and then at Tom. What I say is, why go on living with them if they can't stand them? If I was them, I'd get a divorce and get married to each other right away. Doesn't she like Wilson either? The answer to this was unexpected. It came from Myrtle, who had overheard the question, and it was violent and obscene. You see? Cried Catherine triumphantly. She lowered her voice again. It's really his wife that's keeping them apart. She's a Catholic, and they don't believe in divorce. Gotta be honest, this is as interesting as I was hoping. Don't worry, Grat. It's exactly as boring as I thought it would be. This is... Okay. Like, I had like a very, very passing knowledge of Gatsby. I didn't realize it was just all rich people talking to each other. But it entirely makes sense. I feel very, very bad for... As much as, like, I'm very interested in this as, like, a sort of subject matter. It's Johnny. Did I say Grat instead of Johnny? I'm sorry. My brain is slipping because I've been reading words for 2 hours straight. 1 hour straight. It's only been an hour. It feels like 2. Anyway, I feel really, like, as much as I am interested in this subject matter, I feel really bad for anyone who had to study this in school because it is all people talking. It is just high-class people talking. The descriptions are wonderful, and Nick is an interesting narrator, but it's just rich people talking to each other, and they're all so shallow so far. They're all, like, kind of terrible people. But yes, Johnny, sorry. I didn't mean to say Johnny, but my brain is kind of fizzing out at the moment. Daisy was not a... I just lisped. Daisy was not a Catholic, and I was a little shocked at the elaborateness of the lie. When they do get married, continued Catherine, they're going west to live for a while until it blows over. It'd be more discreet to go to Europe. Oh, you like Europe? She exclaimed surprisingly. I just got back from Monte Carlo. Really? Just last year, I went over there with another girl. Stay long? No, we just went to Monte Carlo and back. We went by way of Marseille. We had over $1,200 when we started, but we got gypped out of it all in 2 days in the private rooms. We had an awful time getting back, I can tell you. God, how I hated that town. Due to Kill a Mockingbird, back next they say the N-word. And it was a fun read. I feel like I'm not allowed to read that on YouTube. The late afternoon sky bloomed in the window for a moment, like the blue honey of the Mediterranean. Then the shrill voice of Mrs. McLean called me back into the room. I almost made a mistake too, she declared vigorously. I almost married a little kike who'd been after me for years. I knew he was below me. Everybody kept saying to me, Lucille, that man's way below you. But if I hadn't met Chester, he'd have got me for sure. Am I allowed to say that K-word that I literally just said? Oh well, whatever. Best not to dwell on it. Yes, but listen, said Myrtle Wilson, nodding her head up and down. At least you didn't marry him. I know I didn't. Well, I married him, said Myrtle ambiguously. And that's the difference between your case and mine. Why did you, Myrtle? Demanded Catherine. Nobody forced you to. Myrtle considered. I married him because I thought he was a gentleman, she said finally. I thought he knew something about breeding, but he wasn't fit to lick my shoe. You were crazy about him for a while, said Catherine. Crazy about him? Cried Myrtle incredulously. Who said I was crazy about him? I never was any more crazy about him than I was about that man there. She pointed suddenly at me, and everyone looked at me accusingly. I tried to show by my expression that I had played no part in her past. The only crazy I was when I married him. I knew right away I made a mistake. He borrowed somebody's best suit to get married in and never even told me about it. And the man came after it one day when he was out. She looked down to see... She looked around to see who was listening. Oh, is that your suit? I said. This is the first I ever heard of it. But I gave it to him and then I lay down and cried to beat the band all afternoon. Say the K word again. I probably shouldn't say that word again. Just in case it was not a word I should be saying. She really ought to get away from him, resumed Catherine to me. They've been living over that garage for 11 years, and Tom's the first sweetie she ever had. The bottle of whiskey, a second one, was now in constant demand by all present, excepting Catherine, who felt just as good on nothing at all. Tom rang for the janitor and sent him for some celebrated sandwiches, which were a complete supper in themselves. I wanted to get out and walk eastward toward the park through the soft twilight, but each time I tried to go, I became entangled in some wild, strident argument which pulled me back, as if with ropes, into my chair. Yet high over the city, our line of yellow windows must have contributed their share of human secrecy to the casual watcher in the darkening streets. And I was him too, looking up and wondering. I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Myrtle pulled her chair close to mine, and suddenly her warm breath poured over me in the story of her first meeting with Tom. It was on the two little seats facing each other that are always the last ones left on the train. I was going up to New York to see my sister and spend the night. He had on a dress suit and patent leather shoes, and I couldn't keep my eyes off him. But every time he looked at me, I had to pretend to be looking at the advertisement over his head. When we came into the station, he was next to me, and his white shirt front pressed against my arm, and so I told him I'd have to call the policeman. But he knew I lied. I was so excited that when I got into a taxi with him, I didn't hardly know I wasn't getting into a subway train. All I kept thinking about over and over was, "You can't live forever, you can't live forever." She turned to Mrs. McKee, and the room rang full of her artificial laughter. "My dear," she cried, "I'm going to give you this dress as soon as I'm through with it. I've got to get another one tomorrow. I'm going to make a list of all the things I've got to get. A massage and a wave and a collar for the dog and one of those cute little ashtrays where you touch a spring and a wreath with a black silk bow for Mother's grave that'll last all summer. I've got to write down a list so I won't forget all the things I've got to do." Let's play Mahjong while you're reading. I don't think I can do that. It was 9 o'clock. Almost immediately afterward, I looked at my watch and found it was 10. This woman have intercourse with a man she literally met on a train? Eventually. I think they had some things after that. But yes, she met him on a train and then got into his cab and then I guess they married. Where was I up to? Right. Mr. McKee was asleep on a chair with his fists clenched in his lap, like a photograph of a man of action. Taking out my handkerchief, I wiped from his cheek the remains of the spot of dried lather that had worried me all afternoon. The little dog was sitting on the table, looking with blind eyes through the smoke, and from time to time groaning faintly. Oh no, the poor dog. No, I'm not going to say the F word. People disappeared, reappeared, made plans to go somewhere, and then lost each other. Searched for each other, found each other a few feet away. Sometime towards midnight, Tom Buchanan and Mrs. Wilson stood face to face, discussing in impassioned voices whether Mrs. Wilson had any right to mention Daisy's name. "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy, I'll say it whenever I want to. Daisy, Making a short, deft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. Oh my god! Wait a minute! Wait a minute! Oh no! Oh no! That went to 0 to 100 really quickly. I'm sorry, anyone who just paid attention. Okay, hang on, that needs a moment to sink in. I need to take a drink. So they killed her. Cool. They did not kill her. But Tom Buchanan did just hit a woman and broke her nose by slapping her that hard. Sorry, I need a minute after that. Oh my goodness, that came out of nowhere. Then there were bloody towels upon the bathroom floor and women's voices scolding, and high over the confusion a long broken wail of pain. Mr. McKee woke from his doze and started in a daze toward the door. When he had gone halfway, he turned around and stared at the scene. His wife and Catherine scolding and consoling as they stumbled here and there among the crowded furniture with articles of aid, and the despairing figure on the couch bleeding fluently and trying to spread a copy of Town Tattle over the tapestry scenes of Versailles. Then Mr. McKee turned and continued on out the door. Taking my hat from the chandelier, I followed. Do you know you can cook a chicken if you slap it hard enough? I have seen that, actually. I have seen the simulations. Come to lunch someday, he suggested as we groaned down in the elevator. Where? Anywhere. Keep your hands off the lever, snapped the elevator boy. I beg your pardon, said Mr. McKee with dignity. I didn't know I was touching it. All right, I agreed. I'll be glad to. I was standing beside his bed and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in his underwear with a great portfolio in his hand. Beauty and the Beast, Loneliness, Old Grocery Horse, Broken Bridge. Then I was lying half asleep in the cold lower level of the Pennsylvania station, staring at the Morning Tribune and waiting for the 4 o'clock train. Interestingly enough, I feel like Jordan never really made any romantic advances toward Nick in this book. Oh wait, is this a spoiler? Sorry. Chapter 3. We are not doing the rest. We are stopping here. I really want to just end the stream, actually. That's probably a good time to end the stream, right? Is everyone asleep now? I can end the stream. Look, I read the news that, like, somebody uploaded this entire book to AO3. I read the news and I was like, okay, I have to see this, and I was like, hey, because it had gone into the public domain for like, basically, it finally had entered the public domain, and I was like, okay, I want to see this. Hey, maybe I can make a stream out of this. So this was a very, very experimental stream. I probably will never come back to this, but for those of you who are here, congratulations, you made it to the end of Chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. You can be proud of that. That is 2/9 of the way through Great Gatsby. Mahjong. I can join you for Mahjong, but I probably won't stream it, I'm afraid, Johnny. I will join you for Mahjong afterwards, though, if you wish. Are you guys curious enough to find out what the one edit in this actual upload is? Because this is actually just The Great Gatsby. Why am I such a... This is actually just The Great Gatsby. There is one edit. What is the edit? What is the edit? It is in Chapter 7. This is all exactly the same, except for the one part in Chapter 7 where Nick and Gatsby, I think they're talking to each other? And then, let me find it. Let me find it. Yeah, so Gatsby and Nick are there together. There's a bunch of conversation, as is usual in this book. Did they edit out an N-word? I'm not sure there was an N-word. And where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I know it's a relatively long part of it. Here we go. Who? Here's Myrtle Wilson again. Here's Tom. Crazy idea. I hope I haven't scrolled past it. That'd be awkward. Gatsby is talking. They're all talking. Gatsby again. Jay Gatsby. Jay Gatsby. Here it is. Sorry. We'll just read from here. That drugstore business was just small change, continued Tom slowly, but you've got something on now that Walter's afraid to tell me about. And this is not in the original. Tom, his nose brushing against Gatsby's, huffed in anger against his steely look that defied the very words Tom was throwing about. And to my shock, with no hesitation, Tom kissed Gatsby on the mouth. A straight, undeniable lock of lips. A few moments passed and they broke away from each other, acting as if that had not just happened. Pimp your hair is like a fuckboy, just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much, Johnny. I will note it for the future. That's it, that's the only change. Everything else is exactly the same. Yeah, no, everything else is exactly the same except Tom and Gatsby have a kiss. A big snog in the middle of it. I did say the F word. I said the fuck word. You called me a fuckboy, so I had to read it out loud. It's okay, we literally just read something about Jay Gatsby and Tom Buchanan. Tom Buchanan and Jay Gatsby just doing a big kiss. They could have done absolutely anything. They chose to just make it gay, but it was in character gay, presumably. I don't know. We never got through the all of The Great Gatsby. That's a little anticlimactic. Look, it's the one subtle change in the entire book, and if you had never read the book before, it is entirely possible that you would have not realized that that was not in the original. But yeah, that's a good point to stop, I think. There it is. That's the first 3 chapters of The Great Gatsby, and then some. Sorry, the first 2 chapters of The Great Gatsby, and then some. No, I'm not continuing. Look, this was an experimental stream. I just really wanted to see what would happen if I did this. I can't believe, like, some of you, like, stayed here the whole time. Like, Grat and Kaiser. I can't believe you guys did that. You're crazy. I'm crazy. Why did I do this? Anyway, thank you, user Antibucci, for uploading the entirety of The Great Gatsby to Archive of Our Own. Thank you all for watching. I look forward to the next part. Johnny, were you here the whole time? Good lord. Thank you for staying here the whole time, Johnny. That was a lie. I only came here to play Mahjong. Oh, I've been fooled. I haven't really been paying attention or understanding this. No, don't worry. I didn't expect anyone to. I was drawing to keep... Yeah, okay. No, so Grant was drawing to keep up his sanity. That was probably the good idea. But anyway, thank you to Antibucci for uploading this. Thank you to you guys for coming. I'm going to mute the music now. I might bring that music back. That was quite pleasant music. I might bring that back in a future stream sometime. Thank you for enduring this with me. Again, I just really wanted to see what would happen if I read The Great Gatsby for like an hour. I wanted to see if people would watch, and apparently I guess you guys did. And the turtle. Thank you, turtle. But yeah, again, unfortunately, I have work all of next week. So we will return to our regularly scheduled programming next week. There will not be any streams until Friday/Saturday, depending on your time zone. Most likely Friday, I think it's for most people. In my time zone, it's actually Saturday. But, I don't know. I'll probably go back to Cyberpunk 2077 unless I find something more interesting to stream. Like Helltaker interrupted me last time. Which I quite enjoyed. Helltaker was a fun time. So yeah, I'll probably wrap it up there. Any objections? Apart from Johnny objecting, telling me to stream Mahjong. I know you're typing that. But yeah. That about wraps things up. That's about it. Short stream, actually. 1.5 hours. I think that's the shortest stream I've ever done. So, yeah, again, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, in air quotes, yourselves. I was not typing anything. Sure. No, I believe you. It's fine. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I will see you guys next time. And I hope you all have a good evening. Thank you very much for coming along. Bye-bye. See you next time. Bye. Ah!